There's actually many different forms of schizophrenia, and to be able to understand the different forms of schizophrenia, you have to be familiar with the different symptoms that can occur. So there's two major classifications of schizophrenia symptoms. You want to be able to know what they are and tell them apart, and then you'll also want to be familiar with the examples of those symptoms. So the big difference between schizophrenia symptoms is that some are positive and some are negative. Now, that doesn't mean that one type of symptom is good and the other is bad. Again, think of addition and subtraction signs. Positive symptoms of schizophrenia refer to something extra that the person is experiencing, whereas negative symptoms of schizophrenia refer to someone who's experiencing less than average or less than normal experiences. So when you think about positive and negative symptoms that way, it becomes easier to understand them. There are two examples of positive symptoms that I want you to know, and those are delusions and hallucinations. Now, these two symptoms are commonly talked about together, and as a result, they're commonly confused, but they're very different. Delusions refer to false beliefs that someone has. So you are very adamant, you feel very strongly that something is true that isn't true. Now, this is different from just thinking something's true that's not. This is, even in the face of evidence, you still are stuck to this idea. And there's lots of types of delusions. There are paranoid delusions, delusions that people are following you. There are delusions of grandeur, where you think you're just amazingly important and that you were put on this earth to just change it for the better and to help everybody out. That's not a bad goal to have, but believing that you are a religious figure or someone who is here to save us all, that's going a little bit too far with that in terms of a healthy way of thinking. So delusions are false beliefs, things that aren't true. Hallucinations, on the other hand, are false sensory perceptions. So this is when people see things that aren't really there or feel things that aren't really there. The most common type of hallucinations are auditory. So this is when people hear voices. And sometimes you see on the news that someone said that, this voice told them to do something. Well, that's an example of a hallucination. So delusions and hallucinations are both positive symptoms, but there's also a negative symptom for schizophrenia. And this symptom is called flat affect. And this is a lack of emotional responsiveness. Now, if I told you that someone you loved had passed away, you would probably all be impacted by that emotionally. You would all show those emotions differently. Some of you would cry in public, some of you would only cry in private, some of you wouldn't cry at all, but you would be impacted in some way. But for some people with schizophrenia, they have this flat affect, which is just no emotional connection to that knowledge whatsoever. So make sure you know the positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia, delusions and hallucinations being the positive ones, and flat affect being the negative ones.